So I finished Dispatch over the past week, and I loved it. I found the narrative, themes, characters, and choices to all be very compelling, and even the resource allocation gameplay loop was super fun and engaging to me. So I decided to clear my schedule of all the other videos I've been swearing I'll get around to eventually, and make a video about this game. We're going to do an episode by episode recap, including the separate paths that come from the most non-innocuous choices, and then I'll get into a bit of why I think this game works, as well as some of the choices that I personally made. So let this be your spoiler warning. Also, just know that I'm trying my absolute best to present the branching paths as coherently as possible. I might not include everything, and I might deliver a few things out of sequence just for the sake of making more narrative sense. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Episode 1 of Dispatch starts with an ad hoc therapy session. Robert Robertson is venting about the loss of his father to somebody off screen who turns out to be a thug that he just beat up. The thug is referred to as Soothing Goon, which is also what you call somebody who likes ASMR for the wrong reasons. Robert is looking for a guy named Shroud who insulted Claire Obscure Expedition 33, killed Robert's father, and the goon isn't really giving up any info, so Robert coerces him by hanging him over a balcony. He gets a location and can either pull the goon back up or drop him off the ledge. Even if he's dropped, the goon survives due to Robert planning ahead and leaving a mattress there. What a good guy. Robert suits up, hops in his mech suit, and heads over to Shroud's base. Robert is a superhero known as Mecha Man. Despite not having any powers of his own, he makes up for it with tech savviness, excellent fighting skills, and a big-ass mech. He pretty handily thrashes a bunch of low-level henchmen only to make it back to the Soothing Goon, who turns out to be a supervillain known as Toxic, who turns into this kind of acid but at the cost of burning off all his clothes.
Cool dick.
Outnumbered by all of Shroud's henchmen, Mecha Man finds himself in a near inescapable situation. He's told by Toxic that all Shroud wants is for Arc Raiders to win Game of the Year. All he wants is the Astral Pulse, which is the power source of the Mecha Man suit. He refuses to give it up, barely escapes with his life, and it looks like he'll live to fight another day until...
Foreign device detected.
Several months later, Mecha Man, having recovered from a coma, announces his retirement from being a superhero. It turns out that, despite the reputation of other tech-based superheroes, Robert was actually dirt poor and was coasting on his inheritance and his father's life insurance policy. The money all ran out, so he could no longer afford to repair the suit. The general public responds pretty poorly to Robert's retirement, feeling like he failed to avenge his father or do anything meaningful with his career. That night, he encounters a group of thugs and, despite having an arm and a sling, attempts to fend them off. He's rescued by a superhero known as the Blonde Blazer. She invites him out for drinks, they hit it off, and then she steps out for a bit. In the downtime, Mecha Man gets accosted by a hero known as Flambe, who used to be a villain until Mecha Man busted him. Robert handily takes care of him using nothing but a glass of water, or alcohol. Depending on the drink used to defeat Flambe, he's either going to have a missing tooth or missing eyebrows for the rest of the game. Robert and Blazer leave the bar and have a discussion about why he quit the superhero business, and depending on how you interpret her signals, you can attempt to kiss her and it goes poorly.
No, this... I'm sorry if I gave the wrong impression.
Girl, you literally touched his face and then said, "We can work with this." How the fuck else is he supposed to interpret that? She offers Robert a chance at redemption by working for the Superhero Dispatch Network, or SDN. He would be in charge of a team of superheroes allocating their time and efforts to various emergencies around town. In return, by going corporate, the SDN will fund the reparations of the mech suit and allow him to eventually become Mecha Man once more. Here's where the core gameplay loop is introduced, and what I really admire about Dispatch is the way they use the gameplay to set the tone and mood of the non-gameplay segments and drive the story forward, which we will see utilized throughout this entire story. Robert accepts this job and he goes home to his crummy apartment and his dog named Beef. Episode 2 begins with Robert arriving at SDN headquarters in his Mecha Man suit. The game provides yaoi enthusiasts with a bit of fan service with this interaction between him and Waterboy, and then Blonde Blazer comes and greets him. She instructs Robert to take off his suit and put on a work uniform because they want to keep his alter ego a secret for now. She also takes a sneak peek at him while he changes, which could mean anything. But one thing this shows off is how much Robert bears the scars of his superhero life. He has quite literally put his blood, sweat, and tears into superhero work despite not having any powers and not having any money. Listening in on this conversation is Invisigal, formerly known as the villain Invisibitch. She's a part of the Phoenix program, which seeks to rehabilitate villains into heroes. Invisigal is instructed to keep Robert's identity a secret. In the bathroom, Robert meets Royd at the urinals, and they have a long conversation while Royd takes an equally long piss. Royd knows Robert is Mecha Man because he's been instructed to relocate the mech suit to SDN headquarters for the repairs. Afterwards, Robert meets Chase, someone who he actually already knew as a childhood friend. You see, Chase is capable of super speed, however, this comes with a huge cost because the rate at which he travels is proportional to how fast he is going to age while he is using his powers. So even though he's a 39-year-old, he has the body and appearance of how Gen Z kids perceive 39-year-olds. Because of this, he is now too far into Unk status to safely use his powers ever again, so he works with the SDN just like Robert. Robert meets his team, who are known as the Z Team. They are a part of the Phoenix program and are known as the worst of the worst. The ones who will probably never be rehabilitated, but the SDN wants to be able to say that at least they tried. There's Sonar, a man-bat hybrid who's obsessed with cocaine, and he's voiced by Moist Critical. Flambe, the guy who tried to pick a fight with Mecha Man the night before. Invisigal, who can go invisible but only while holding her breath, but she's also asthmatic, so that makes a little bit of a problem there. Coupe, a mercenary who uses knives. Punch Up, a short, buff Irishman who literally cannot feel pain. Malevola, who is basically magic from Marvel Comics. Golem, a sentient mud construct. And Proton, a pop star who can control light. The shift shows that the team is really rough around the edges. Robert struggles to rein them all in on the first day as he hasn't quite earned their respect yet. And the day ends with Invisigal botching a dispatch call to a robbery due to being a bit too brash. In the break room, she and Robert hash it out, and it ends with her punching him. Then Sonar comes for the Twinks.
You gonna eat those Twinks?
Robert has a meeting with Blonde Blazer and Chase, and he can either rat out Invisigal for punching him or keep it quiet, but he does agree that they need to treat the Z team differently if they want results. Blazer and Robert start to talk about their feelings when they're interrupted by Phenomenon, who happens to be dating Blazer. After negging the absolute hell out of Robert,
The way you spoke of him made him sound impressive.
he invites him to dinner. Regardless of your response, the two lovebirds go off alone. In episode 3, Robert and Royd relocate the Mecha Man armor to SDN headquarters, and it is revealed that Royd isn't just the muscle behind relocating the suit, he's also the scientist behind the repairs. The biggest barrier to repairing this thing is recreating the astral pulse. This is the suit's power supply, which was lost in the explosion, and the only part of the suit that didn't have any schematics involved. At the start of the shift, Blonde Blazer tells you two things. One, she and Phenomenon broke up at the dinner the last night, and two, you're going to have to cut somebody from the Z team at the end of the day. She already told the team, so they're all feeling a little anxious over it. Especially Sonar, Coupe, and Invisigal, who are at the bottom of the leaderboard. Robert tells them that they don't need to be the best, they just need to not be the worst. Which is a really bad way to phrase this to a group of supervillains because they spend the entire first half of the day just sabotaging each other. The shift ends with Invisigal stopping Malevola from capturing the guy that Invisigal accidentally let escape in the prior episode. Robert calls for an emergency meeting where he gives them all a pep talk about their potential or their pain or their redemption depending on your dialogue choices. This seems to motivate the Z team as they stop throwing in the second half of the day. All except for Invisigal, who refuses to go on any dispatch you send her to. At the end of the day, she wanders off to a park, and Robert is able to patch in and give her a more personalized pep talk to let her know that her actions can matter if she chooses to make them matter. Coincidentally, the same guy that Invisigal let escape twice is robbing a jewelry store 2 blocks away, and using her newfound motivation, she's able to stop him. She comes back to SDN headquarters and receives a hero's welcome. It also turns out that the points that she earned from this dispatch call make it so Invisigal is no longer the bottom frag of the team, so Robert has to choose to cut Coupe or Sonar, which he does. Of all of the major choices in dispatch, this one feels like the least consequential as it mainly just determines who's going to be on your team for the rest of the game. While at his desk packing up, Robert sees Invisigal have a little moment of happiness as she celebrates not being at the bottom of the leaderboard, showing that she has hope in her own redemption. That night, Invisigal has a sex dream about Robert. She starts being a little flirty with him, something that he can reciprocate or shut down based on dialogue options. We also see that Phenomenon is taking the breakup a little too rough by disrupting traffic and threatening civilians. This causes him to get cut from his superhero team. He spends a lot of his time at SDN headquarters trying to win Blonde Blazer back, and Robert has the opportunity to go give him a pep talk. During this talk, Robert can confess if he kissed Blonde Blazer, and Phenomenon will suspect him of being a homewrecker until Robert tells him that he's not a good enough kisser for that to happen, and Phenomenon verifies this and concludes that he is not in fact the homewrecker that he suspected.
I now believe that you had nothing to do with our breakup.
The first shift in this episode is a little hectic and overly chaotic to highlight the fact that you are short-staffed after cutting Coupe or Sonar loose. After spreading your team a little too thin, Blonde Blazer suggests you recruit a new member to the team. There's Waterboy, the janitor whose power involves puking up water, and there's Phenomenon, an incredibly strong but potentially unstable option. Kind of like the Coupe and Sonar choice, this option mostly just affects who's in Z-Team cutscenes further down the line. Phenomenon has really strong stats, but he gets depressed super easily, so if he fails a job, he's out of commission for longer than other heroes would be. Meanwhile, Waterboy is incredibly weak and is a little too eager, so if you don't send him out on jobs for a long time, he'll just insert himself into a job even if he's not the right person for it. But both of these characters really fit in thematically to Dispatch, as they are characters who are broken and they need to be coached into filling their role properly. The second half of this shift feels like the first time you actually start to get a groove going, without any major setbacks occurring. After this, he notices that Invisigal has once again snuck off, this time to a movie theater. While talking to her, she pulls the whole, "Oh, I wish there was somebody here to share snacks with and enjoy this movie together." At the same time, Robert receives a text message from Blonde Blazer asking him out to dinner. You can either surprise Invisigal at the movie theater and have some dope-ass product placement.
Do you like Sour Patch Kids?
I fucking love Sour Patch Kids.
Cool. Me too.
Or go to dinner with Blazer. At dinner, Blazer confesses that her Blazer form is not what she truly looks like. She actually is just a brunette who is equally as hot but 3 inches shorter. Robert has the option to start a romance with her by kissing her at this time. Throughout episode 5, Robert has flashbacks to one of his missions as Mecha Man where he defeated Flambe. If he is dating Blonde Blazer, he agrees to go on a second date with her when she comes to see him in the locker room. It is revealed that the Z-Team are all taking bets on who Robert used to be before he became a dispatcher. There is $937 riding on this bet. The shift is disrupted when there's a huge power outage that affects the entire city, but the team manages to pull through. Afterwards, they decided to go out to drinks, something that Z-Team has been doing since day one, but have only just now invited Robert along. The bar that they choose is one for villains, which causes problems for Robert, because to a villain, he looks like someone who would call the FBI if he found out somebody was sharing a Netflix password. A criminal gang starts a brawl in the bar, and the Z-Team manages to come out mostly unscathed, aside from a little friendly fire. They go out for 3 a.m. tacos afterwards, and after all that team building and camaraderie, Robert reaches a critical moment where he can either continue to hide his secret identity from Z-Team, or he can fess up to being Mecha Man. If he decides to continue hiding his identity, he spews another speech about how who they were doesn't matter, and what matters most is who they are going to be. Flambe doesn't exactly buy this bullshit, but they all share their names with each other. If Robert fesses up, Flambe gets pissed since Mecha Man is the guy who busted him. He tries to kill Robert, but Golem saves him. Flambe does his flame on thing and flames off into the horizon, and then everybody else shares their first names with each other.
My name's Courtney.
Sometimes Herman or Hermie, but my grandma calls me Herm, so Herm.
My name's Victor, because I'm a fucking winner.
I'm Alice.
Bruno.
Malevola. My last name's Gibb.
My name's Colin.
And you, the player, maybe feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy inside, knowing you're building virtual trust between virtual characters. Episode 6 starts with Royd and Robert conducting another test on the astral pulse for the mech suit. If Robert told the team his identity, they're all there to witness this, and if he did not, then it's just Invisigal. This test, just like the other 18 tests before it, goes horribly wrong and the suit explodes, which knocks Robert out for about half a day. He wakes up in the hospital and decides to go clock in for his work like a true corpo. The shift goes off relatively fine, although if you did fess up your identity, Flambe will not be there. Robert returns home and vents to Beef about how the suit might never be repaired, but concedes that what he's doing now may even be a higher calling and could be his path to redemption. It is then that Malevola, Invisigal, and Royd show up with some news. The astral pulse explosion from earlier seemed familiar to Vizzy, and they were able to deduce that the astral pulse survived the explosion from episode 1 and has been exchanging hands throughout the criminal underworld ever since the incident, with nobody able to figure out how to get it to work. The Z team has a party at Robert's apartment while they track it down. They track the the astral pulse, to a warehouse on the coast. Due to how often the astral pulse has been exchanging hands, several members of the Z team want to go right then and there and storm the place, while Chase and Blonde Blazer want to be more cautious and devise a plan. Regardless of what side Robert takes, Chase picks a fight with Vizzy, which causes her to sucker punch him and storm out of the party. If Flambe and Robert are currently beefing, Flambe shows up and gets in a sucker punch against Robert, saying that he needs to get a good one in every now and then, but will otherwise do his best to get along with the team. Everybody then leaves the party. Not long after, Chase returns to apologize to Robert, and they go back up to his apartment to have a few small beers. There they find out that Invisigal stormed the warehouse on her own to find the astral pulse. Robert helps her locate it so she can hopefully find it and get the hell out safely, but who shows up? You guessed it, Shroud. Detecting that this is a story-based game and not a multiplayer shooter, Shroud has a bone to pick with everyone and tries to kill Invisigal and take the astral pulse for himself. Chase, using his super speed, manages to save Invisigal from his grasp. But as we already discussed earlier, Chase is far too unk to safely use his powers again, and so he dies. Just kidding, Chase isn't dead, but he's in critical condition. Blazer tries to comfort Robert, but Mecha Man is near his breaking point, as is the rest of Z Team. The shift is somber and rainy, and the team forgoes their usual banter. The sour mood spills over into the break. The Z team is stressed out and disappointed in Invisigal, and they all voted to cut her from the team. Golem and Flambe are the only ones who vouched for her, but they understand that cutting her might be the best option. If Phenomenon is on your team, then he abstains from the vote, but that's because he has more important things on his mind.
I only came in as I thought we were playing Magic the Gathering tonight. I am hoping we still may.
Robert can choose to cut Invisigal or keep her on the team. This is where things start to branch off quite a bit, so bear with me as I try to cover everything. If he refuses to cut her, she will remain suspended, but the team members who wanted her gone will take a hit to their morale and they will suffer a debuff during the next shift. If he decides to drop her from the team, then this debuff won't happen to anybody. Either way, in case it wasn't completely obvious, Vizzy was invisible and listening in on the whole thing. Robert follows her into the locker room and she reveals something important to him. Her boobs. She also reveals this augmentation that's attached to her, which is something that Shroud designs for each of his henchmen to make them stronger in some way, shape, or form. This effectively reveals that she has been working with Shroud. Vizzy's augmentation increases her lung capacity. As I mentioned earlier, she's an asthmatic who can only go invisible while holding her breath. Her condition was worsening, so in an act of desperation, she asked Shroud for help. He gave her the augmentation to expand her lung capacity, but she was indebted to him and had to work for him. He told her that her debt would be cleared if she could do one final job: plant a bomb on Mecha Man while he was restrained. After doing this job, Shroud ended up deactivating the augment anyway. Vizzy swears that after this happened, she felt bad, and the very next day she joined the Phoenix program. Robert has the option to immediately forgive Invisigal or tell her to piss off. If he's nice to her, she'll fess up that she has feelings for him and then do that thing where she goes invisible and pretends to walk away, but instead of punching him, Vizzy will kiss Robert. Robert can either accept or reject this kiss. If Robert isn't merciful towards Vizzy after her confession, she'll walk away without just planting one on him. Robert then goes to a villain bar to drink away his bad mood. The bartender starts sexualizing Blonde Blazer, to which Robert can either knock him on his ass or just let it go. Regardless of his choice, the only other guy sitting at the bar it's Shroud, making up for the lack of guns in this game. It's revealed here that whoever you cut in episode 3, be it Coupe or Sonar, is now working for Shroud. Together, Shroud and the former Z-Team member torture Robert, asking him where the astral pulse is. This is confusing because we're all made to assume that he had taken it from Invisigal in the last episode. But no, turns out she pocketed it for herself. As the interrogation progresses, Shroud decides to turn it into a game of chance. The revolver he has once belonged to Robert Robertson II, Robert's dad, and it has one bullet left in it. That's because Shroud used the other 5 bullets to shoot Robbie. Before he can get that 16.67% chance though, Robert is saved by Blonde Blazer, who manages to convince Shroud and his gang to leave rather than stay and suffer heavy losses in a fight with her. Also, it's revealed that she found Robert by tracking his phone. Robert and Mandy, that's Blazer's name by the way, have a conversation on the billboard where they chatted on their first night, but they're interrupted by the Red Ring, which is Shroud's gang, launching a full-on assault on Los Angeles. Despite his severe wounds, Robert asks Blazer to take him with her to the SDN so they can fend them off. Okay, we're in the final stretch, but episode 8 has a lot of variables in it, so let's just do our best and be patient with the YouTuber, okay? Okay. The SDN is on high alert and running on fumes. Blazer decides to head out into the city and fight rather than do her normal administration duties. At this late hour, only Punch-Up, Prism, and Golem are available. But there's a bit of a problem. Punch-Up and Prism are demotivated if you did not respect their wishes and kept Invisigal, and Golem took some gummies to fall asleep, so he's a little bit high right now. There's also a health bar for Los Angeles during the shift, meaning if you fail too many missions or you let Coupe or Sonar take over too much, you'll lose the city. As the night progresses, you find some of the team members in need of rescuing, while others show up after finally making it into the office. If you didn't cut Invisigal, she shows up to help as well. Even still, you're overwhelmed. Robert manages to recruit either Phenomenon or Waterboy, whoever he didn't recruit in episode 4, and they join the Z team, bringing the total up to 8 or 9, depending on if Invisigal is there. Realizing that Shroud is purposely attacking in a widespread area to drag everybody out and force them to come back to headquarters in between missions, Robert suggests they don't return to rest and stay where they are after finishing a mission. When a team member is about to lose a critical mission, suddenly the success bar changes because Blazer hops in. With the full squad of 10, or 9 if you're heartless to Vizzy, the Z team manages to fend off the Red Ring, but the power shuts off. After checking on Chase, Robert hears a fight going on nearby. Invisigal snuck into the labs and was caught by Royd, who subdues her and zip ties her. He finds the astral pulse on her person and gives it to Robert, along with a taser he can use to defend himself while he tries to reach the armor. Vizzy asserts that she only kept the astral pulse to herself because she knew Shroud would think that she returned it to Robert and would succeed in stealing it from him, which is a pretty good point because he definitely would have gotten it in the bar. A henchman shows up but is too distracted by his need to pee to notice them. Vizzy asks Robert to untie her so she can help him, and he has the choice to do so or leave her there. If Robert cuts Vizzy loose, she'll help him take out the guard while he's peeing, but she'll urge Robert to put the guy's genitals back in his pants to preserve his decency.
Fuck. Alright. Piss everywhere.
Thank you. That was very decent of you.
If Robert leaves Invisigal tied up and goes it alone, she calls out to the henchman before Robert can stun him, causing him to pee all over Robert. Robert makes his way to the Mecha Man armor, and now the final battle begins. Shroud's superpower is that he is super smart. He has predicted every possibility, so barely anything the Z team does surprises him. He is caught off guard, however, when he thinks he's crushing Blonde Blazer, only for it to be an illusion created by Prism. Shroud does manage to get the upper hand again by absolutely laying Blonde Blazer the F out, and as he's about to deliver the killing blow to Mecha Man, something that not even Shroud could predict happens. Chase. In case you didn't catch it when we were talking about it in episode 4, Mandy is only the Blonde Blazer when she is wearing her special amulet. This is something that is only known to her and Robert. Shroud is really smart, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So when she got knocked off screen by Shroud, she went and found Chase, who was basically on his deathbed, and gave him the amulet to transform him into the new Blonde Blazer. By catching Shroud off guard and destroying a critical component of his spider mech, the Z team is able to gain the upper hand and hand his ass to him. They all start to celebrate.
We fucked them in the face!
That is, they celebrate until Robert is coerced into going up onto the rooftop alone with Shroud to hand over the astral pulse so that Beef does not get killed. Here, Shroud reveals that everything up until this point has all been part of the plan and that Invisigal has been on his side the whole time. He also reveals that his motivation had nothing to do with Arc Raiders being Game of the Year, but actually had to do with Robert's father, Robert Robertson II. When they used to be heroes together, Shroud promised Robert that he would create the Astral Pulse for him if Robert would help Shroud create a mech, and Robert never held up his end of the deal. Before stepping out of his mech to bring him the Astral Pulse, Robert notices that he still has the defective prototype that blows up stashed away in a cup. If Robert gives Shroud the real Astral Pulse, Shroud is able to discern based on Robert's body language that it is the real one, so he inserts it into his head augmentation, which greatly increases his brain function. He determines that the longer he keeps Robert alive, the higher likelihood he has of being defeated. So, Shroud aims his gun at Robert to shoot him. However, let's just rewind a little bit. If Robert attempts to give Shroud the fake astral pulse, Shroud sees through the bullshit, calls the bluff, and forces Robert to give him the real astral pulse. He then inserts the real one into his brain augmentation, determines that the longer Robert is alive, blah 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 blah, aims his gun at him to shoot him. But hold on, let's rewind one more time because there's one more scenario. Robert can remove the sticker from the fake astral pulse and give both of them to Shroud, resulting in this.
What the fuck is this, Robert?
You said you wanted the astral pulse. I gave it to you. One of those is it.
They look fucking identical, Robert.
Since Robert doesn't know which is real, Shroud can't determine based on body language which one is the real astral pulse. So now he's truly down to a 50-50 scenario. He's flustered, but doesn't want to look weak or unsure in front of everyone.
Maybe we wait till we get home?
Shut the fuck up!
So he picks one and confidently plugs it in. It looks like he was right until... yeah, he lost that coin toss there. What happens next depends on how well Robert treated Invisigal these last few episodes. If Robert trusted her through and through, Courtney sees the potential within herself that Robert was seeing since day one. She recognizes that she can be a hero, so she decides to be one by taking a bullet for Robert. If you'll remember in episode 7, this bullet was meant to be symbolic as it was the final one in the gun. Shroud is stunned by not accounting for Vizzy to actually be a good guy, and Robert takes advantage of this moment to tackle him and beat the snot out of him. After subduing him, Robert has a choice to spare Shroud or kill him. If, however, Robert did not trust Invisigal, she recognizes that the one person who she put her full faith in didn't have any faith in her, which diverts her from the heroic path that she was on. Instead of having a chance to shoot Robert, Shroud is ambushed by Vizzy and she stabs him in the neck, killing him. She then takes his mask but tosses the real astral pulse back to Robert before she leaves. Going back to the timeline where she takes a bullet for him, once the emergency crews arrive, Vizzy is wheeled off in a stretcher. They kiss if Robert chose her as his romantic partner, and they have a platonic buddy moment if he did not. The next choice is what to do with the cut member of the Z team. Robert can either show mercy to Coupe or Sonar and recruit them back onto the team, or he can send them off with the other criminals. Robert then goes over and shares a beer with Mandy, who says that she's letting Chase keep the blonde blazer amulet until they figure out what they can do to improve his health. They share a kiss if she's his romantic partner. If Robert has been trying to be romantic with both Blazer and Invisigal, Mandy will comment on the kiss that she literally just saw Robert share with Courtney when she was being wheeled off into the ambulance. And while they don't share a kiss in this scenario, Mandy says that she doesn't take it personally and that the two of them are fine. The Z team shares a group photo as they drop Robert, and if Vizzy is friendly towards Robert, she escapes the paramedics to photobomb them. Then the credits roll. If you'll bear with me for a moment, I'd like to talk a bit about what makes this game work for me, and then a bit about what my major choices were and why I made them. I think we're at a point in time where people are starting to get a little tired of superhero stories. They're no longer the instant $1 billion button that Disney and Warner Brothers can push at strategic times throughout the year to make earnings calls look better, and I think it's for good reason. We've seen a lot of them in the past couple decades or so. And a big part of the reaction to superhero fatigue has been the surge in popularity of the mature-rated superhero stories. The ones that show gore and sex and they say fuck, and it boils down to like, what if Superman were evil? And what if there were corporations that did evil shit with him? And what if it was related to the hyper-specific current political climate? Don't get me wrong, I love The Boys. I just feel like this pendulum swing has offered little else besides shock value and copious amounts of cynicism. So for AdHoc to come in with a mature-rated superhero story with gore and sex and curse words, but make it an overall optimistic story about redemption instead of the inherent corruption that comes with power, is a nice breath of fresh air. Would a real-life Superman succumb to the temptations that come from absolute power while being surrounded by a bunch of dumb, stupid idiots like the humans on this planet? Probably, but we've heard that story 1,000 times. So it's cool to have an original superhero story where their Superman is just a dork who gets depressed instead of an allegory for fascism. And your character, a relative normie, is there to help mold and shape him into a better hero. I think the whole theme of change, healing, and redemption works so well in a story like Dispatch. Robert is a broken person who has only been a superhero in his adult life, and now he has to cope with the fact that he can't be one anymore. And his way of coping is helping a bunch of other broken people in their journey through rehabilitation, so they can be the one thing that he currently wants to be but can't be. That's a cool dynamic. And everything in this game gives service to the theme that people can change. From the Phoenix program being named after the bird of rebirth, to the movie snack of choice being a sour candy that turns sweet if you're patient enough with it. And like I said, it's a huge breath of fresh air to have a non-Marvel, non-DC superhero story be about something other than evil Superman, corrupt corporations, and the rise of totalitarianism. But now let's get to the part that maybe 1% of you give a crap about, what I chose and why I chose it. I don't necessarily think there are wrong choices in Dispatch. It is your story and you control the buttons you press. Plus, Robert gives equally compelling pep talks for just about every one of the major decisions, showing that the characters are more than willing to yes and their way through whatever choices you make. But usually when I play a game like Dispatch, I make the choices that I personally would make if I were the character on my first playthrough. That being said, these were the things that I did in my first go-around of Dispatch. In episode 3, I cut Coupe from the Z team, and this was by far my most arbitrary choice and reasoning. I just watch Moist Critical sometimes, and as such, I wanted to see his character's arc. When it came time to choose the new team member in episode 4, I picked Waterboy over Phenomenon. I personally felt like, as somebody willing to prove himself, Robert could better mold Herm into what the team needed. Plus, when it comes to Superman-like characters and mature stories, I immediately assume they're going to turn evil. Pattern recognition, you know? For the same reason, I was expecting the SDN to be this super corrupt evil organization, but no, they're just a workplace. So had I known Phenomenon was a wholesome depressed being that just needed some encouragement, I would have been more likely to pick him on my first playthrough, but I really liked Herm and he was the perfect support character for certain calls. In episode 5, I had Robert tell the team that he was Mecha Man. I just felt like my version of Robert was putting his faith and trust in the team entirely, and as such, he owed it to them to be open and honest with them in return. In episode 7, I chose to keep Invisigal on the team. I immediately forgave her, but I did not reciprocate the kiss. The moment in episode 3 where Vizzy is excited to see her spot on the leaderboard was what sealed it for me that regardless of whatever happened to her, I would root for her and I would help her become the hero I knew she could be. The team made some good points that I had cut Coop for far less, but more time had passed since then and the team was becoming a tight-knit family, and in my eyes, the new circumstances meant different rules were applying. I had Robert forgive Courtney since it had been several months since the incident, and Robert is very much a you can't change the past, you can only change what you are going to do going forward kind of guy. Like, sure, you almost killed me and forced me into early retirement. Water under the bridge, baby. In episode 8, I freed Vizzy because once again, I trusted her and believed she would make the right choices when push came to shove. I put the guy's dick away for him as a show of trust to Courtney. I gave both the prototype and the pulse to Shroud because I felt that was the only way I could possibly outsmart him. And finally, I chose to smooch Mandy. To me, the choice between Mandy and Courtney was pretty obvious early on. I think you can go tit for tat on who did more for Robert or who did more to him, but one of my core personal beliefs is that if somebody is overcoming an addiction or a hard time in their life and they're trying to get themselves on the right track, if they tie that transformation into a romantic relationship, that's a recipe for disaster. It can lead to codependence and an easier relapse if things start to go south. I wanted Invisigal to become a better person for herself and not for Robert. So to me, it felt like an ethical dilemma if Robert and Courtney were to date. Also, I just thought Mandy was some fine shit. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, themes, and choices in Dispatch. I thought the game was great. If we didn't also have Expedition 33 and Silksong in the same year, it would be a serious contender for my personal favorite of 2025. But it's definitely going to be a top 5. You could even say that it was phenomenal.